pressait des braconniers qui capturaient les lapreaux à la main. Rose, fière de son ventre toujours gros, qui tous les soirs lui servait largement le lait, lui avait fait un enfant. De Thérèse et de Fred nés de l'amour et le condamnaient.
Dis André, tout à l'heure. Sûr. Tiens. Ça ferait un bâtard de moi. Tiens André. C'est tout. Ça m'embête, j'ai rien pu t'envoyer depuis la mort de papa.
Alors comment ça va? Bah si on te le demande, tu diras qu'on sait rien.
Oui. Paul! Je pars! Rarement il te cassera la figure! L'histoire, je vais t'écrire là! Tout ce qu'il y a à voir. Ah, ils sont dégoûtants. Tu diras à personne ce que je vais dire.
La fille du maire, elle est filmée, hein.
Le flan de notre mécanicien, il a... Voilà ce que je fais.
Vas-y, ma belle.
Cacher les amoureux.
Summer, 1939. 12-year-old Marie arrives at her grandmother's countryside home, believing this holiday will be like every other, sunlit fields, village games, and evenings beneath the stars. But something has changed, not the village, her. Whispers of war drift through the peaceful streets, yet Marie barely hears them. Her attention is captured by Alexandre, the village's young Jewish doctor. He speaks to her gently, and one innocent smile is enough to awaken feelings she cannot name. Suddenly, childhood games seem foolish. Her parents' secretive laughter feels suspicious. Every closed door appears to hide an adult truth. Then Marie notices the way her mother looks at Alexandre, and one afternoon, when her father leaves the village, Marie watches them disappear together into the woods. Marie follows at a distance, branches scratching her bare legs as she slips between the trees. Ahead, her mother and Alexandre stop beside the river. They speak too softly to hear, but their closeness says enough. Marie's chest tightens. The man she has secretly begun to love is looking at her mother with the same tenderness Marie imagined was meant for her. She runs home before they can see her. That evening, laughter fills the dinner table, yet Marie barely touches her food. Her mother acts perfectly normal. Alexandre does too. That makes it worse. Outside, church bells echo across the darkening village, while distant radio reports warn that war is moving closer. But inside Marie, another war has already begun, and soon jealousy will push her toward a cruel mistake. The next morning, Marie avoids Alexandre, but every sound of his bicycle outside makes her look toward the window. She hates herself for hoping he will notice her absence. When he finally enters the house, carrying medicine for her grandmother, Marie keeps her eyes lowered. "Are you angry with me?" he asks softly. Her fingers tighten around the tablecloth. She wants to accuse him, to demand why he chose her mother, but the words remain trapped behind her teeth. Instead, she lies. "I don't care about you." Alexandre smiles sadly, as if he understands more than she has said. Later, Marie finds her mother alone, humming while folding clothes. For one reckless second, Marie considers revealing everything to her father. Then she sees a letter hidden beneath the linen addressed to Alexandre, and the handwriting is her mother's. Marie waits until her mother leaves the room. Then she slides the letter from beneath the linen, her hands moving so quickly that the paper trembles between her fingers. The envelope is unsealed. One pull, and every secret will belong to her. She reads. The words are not romantic, not at first. Eva writes about the heat, the restless nights, the sound of the river beyond the trees. Then the sentences change. She tells Alexandre that she had forgotten what it felt to be seen, not as Jeanne's wife, not as Marie's mother, but as herself. She begs him not to visit the house again. She says her husband will return soon. The final line is unfinished. A floorboard creaks behind her. Marie turns. Her grandmother stands in the doorway, holding a basket of herbs. She does not shout. She does not snatch the letter away. Somehow her silence feels worse. "You shouldn't read what wasn't written for you," the old woman says. Marie's face burns. She's betraying Papa. Her grandmother places the basket on the table. The sharp smell of crushed mint rises between them. For a moment, she looks older than Marie has ever noticed, her shoulders bent beneath memories she has carried without complaint. "Adults betray each other in many ways," she says. "Sometimes by leaving. Sometimes by staying while their hearts are somewhere else." Marie cannot accept that. Her father is kind. Her mother laughs with him. They share a bed, a home, a daughter. Those things are supposed to mean safety. They are supposed to mean forever. But her grandmother sees the question in her eyes. "Your mother is not a monster," she continues. "She is lonely." Marie's throat tightens. "Then what am I?" The question escapes before she can stop it. Her grandmother's expression softens. She reaches for Marie, but Marie steps back. Right now, comfort feels like surrender. If her mother is allowed to be lonely, then Marie's pain becomes childish. Small, invisible. Outside, the village is preparing for a celebration. Music drifts from the square. Children race past the windows carrying paper decorations, and men gather around a radio, arguing over names of distant countries. Europe is moving toward disaster, but inside this room, Marie can think only of one unbearable truth. Alexandre never belonged to her. He had merely been kind, and she had built an entire dream around that kindness. Then another thought arrives. Cruel, bright, irresistible. Her father deserves to know. Marie folds the letter and slips it into her dress. Her grandmother catches her wrist. "Give it to me." "No." "Marie." The girl pulls free and runs. She tears through the village square, past laughing couples and musicians tuning their instruments. Dust rises beneath her shoes. At the doctor's house, Alexandre is loading bottles and bandages into a leather case. He looks up when she appears, breathless and pale. "Marie? What happened?" She throws the letter onto his table. For the first time, his calm disappears. His eyes move over Eva's handwriting, then return to Marie. There is no anger in his face, only fear. "You read this? She loves you." He closes the door quickly. The latch strikes with a hard metallic click. Marie expected denial, perhaps even shame. Instead, Alexandre kneels so they are level, and his voice becomes painfully gentle. "What you think you feel for me will pass." The words cut deeper than any insult. "You don't know what I feel. I know you're young. I'm not a child." Silence. Alexandre looks toward the shaded window, where the village flags flutter in the afternoon light. When he speaks again, his voice has changed. "Soon, none of this may matter. Not your mother, not me. There are people who already believe someone like me has no place here." Marie has heard the word whispered behind him before, Jew. Until now, it meant nothing, just another adult label. But she sees his fingers tighten around the letter. She sees the exhaustion beneath his eyes. Alexandre is not only hiding an affair, he is waiting for a danger no one else wants to name. A knock shakes the door. Once. Twice. Then her father's voice comes from outside. "Alexandre? Open up. I've come back early." Marie freezes. Alexandre crushes the letter in his fist, and through the thin wooden door, Jeanne calls again, this time asking whether his wife is inside. Alexandre does not move. Neither does Marie. Her father's shadow stretches beneath the door, cutting across the floor like a blade. "Open it," Marie whispers. Alexandre looks at the crumpled letter in his hand. One page. A few unfinished sentences. Enough to break a marriage. He slips it into his medical case, then lifts the latch. Jeanne stands outside wearing the dust of the road on his jacket. His smile disappears when he sees Marie inside. "What are you doing here?" Marie opens her mouth. But Alexandre answers first. She came because her grandmother felt unwell. The lie enters the room so smoothly that for one dangerous second it almost sounds true. Jeanne glances at the bottles on the table. Then at Marie's empty hands. No basket, no message, no sign of urgency. His gaze settles on Alexandre's face. "And Eva? She isn't here." Another silence. From the village square comes a burst of music, followed by applause. People are celebrating beneath strings of colored paper while three lives balance on the edge of a sentence. Jeanne finally steps aside. "Come home, Marie." She follows him without looking back. The walk feels endless. Her father says nothing as they pass neighbors carrying wine and flowers toward the square. Marie can hear his boots striking the road. Slow, heavy. Each step sounds like a question he has not yet asked. At home, Eva is standing before the mirror, pinning up her hair. She wears a pale dress Jeanne once bought her in Paris. When she sees him in the reflection, her face brightens too quickly. "You're back." Jeanne kisses her cheek. She turns just enough that his lips barely touch her skin. Marie sees it, so does he. But Jean only places his suitcase beside the bed and says he was able to finish his business early. Eva begins talking about the evening celebration, about food, music, and how pleased Marie's grandmother will be to have everyone together. Her words rush forward, filling every space where suspicion might breathe. Then Jean notices Marie watching them. "Go wash," he says. "You look as if you've been rolling in the road." Upstairs, Marie scrubs dirt from her knees until her skin turns red. She stares at her own face in the basin mirror. Alexandra's words return. "What you think you feel will pass." She wants to hate him. She wants to hate her mother. Instead, guilt presses against her ribs. The letter is now hidden in his case, and her father has already sensed something. She has not exposed the truth, but she has pulled it closer to the surface. By nightfall, the square glows with lanterns. An accordion sings above the crowd. Couples turn beneath the lights, skirts sweeping dust into the warm air. For a little while, the village pretends the world beyond its fields does not exist. Jean drinks with old friends. Eva dances with Marie's grandmother. Alexandre stands near the edge of the square, speaking to a farmer whose child has a fever. Marie sees him before he sees her. Then Eva sees him too. The smallest change crosses her face. Her smile remains, but her fingers stop moving. One beat, two. Then she looks away. Jeanne follows her gaze. Marie's stomach drops. He says nothing. He simply empties his glass and walks toward Alexandre. The music continues, bright and careless. Jean shakes the doctor's hand. Anyone watching would see two men greeting each other politely. But Marie is close enough to notice Jean's grip. Too tight. Alexandre's knuckles whiten. "I hear my daughter visited you today," Jean says. Alexandre gives Marie one brief glance. Her grandmother needed medicine. Strange. "My mother-in-law says she asked for nothing." The accordion player reaches the end of a song. Applause explodes around them. Alexandre waits for the noise to fade. Then Marie must have misunderstood. Jeanne turns toward his daughter. Every face seems to vanish except his. "Did you misunderstand?" Marie cannot breathe. Her mother is standing several steps away now. The blood has drained from her cheeks. Her grandmother watches from beside the musicians, one hand pressed against her chest. Marie could tell the truth. She could say she found the letter, followed them to the river, and saw the way her mother looked at another man. Instead, she stares at the dust beneath her shoes. Yes. Jeanne studies her for so long that her skin begins to prickle. Then he smiles, though no warmth reaches his eyes. Children misunderstand many things. His voice is gentle. That frightens her more than anger. A village official suddenly calls for silence. The musicians lower their instruments. Someone turns up the radio near the cafe window. Static crackles. Then a strained voice speaks of armies, borders, and mobilization. Men who were laughing moments earlier stand rigid. Women pull children closer. The celebration does not end all at once. It dies piece by piece, like lanterns going dark. Alexandre listens without moving. Jeanne looks at him, and for one moment suspicion gives way to something colder. Everyone knows what war may mean. But for Alexandre, the danger has already begun. A painted insult appeared on his clinic wall weeks earlier. Patients who once trusted him now hesitate at his door. If the wrong men arrive, being innocent will not protect him. Eva steps toward him. Jeanne catches her wrist, not violently, just firmly enough. She stops. "Come home," he says. The four of them leave the square beneath a sky emptied of music. Marie walks behind her parents. Jean has not released Eva's wrist. Alexandre remains near the silent radio, growing smaller in the distance. At the house, Jeanne sends Marie upstairs. She climbs halfway, then crouches behind the banister. Below, a chair scrapes across the floor. Jeanne's voice is quiet. "How long?" Eva says nothing. "How long have you loved him?" Marie presses both hands over her mouth. Her mother whispers, "You don't understand." Then comes the sound of Jeanne's suitcase opening. A moment later, he places something on the table, the missing letter. Jeanne smooths the letter against the table with both hands. The paper is wrinkled where Alexandre crushed it, but Eva's handwriting remains clear. Every word sits between husband and wife like broken glass. "Did you write this?" Jeanne asks. Eva stares at the floor. Yes, Marie grips the banister until her fingers ache. Jeanne waits for an explanation. None comes. The silence stretches, thick and airless. Then he reads the unfinished final line aloud. Eva flinches as if he has struck her. I asked him to stay away, she whispers. But you wanted him to come back. Her eyes lift. No denial. Jeanne's face changes. Not rage. Something worse. The look of a man discovering that the home he trusted has been slowly emptying around him. He folds the letter once, twice, then tears it down the middle. Eva reaches for the pieces, but Jeanne lets them fall. Upstairs? Marie's knee slips against the wooden step. The creak is tiny. Jeanne hears it. He turns toward the staircase. Come down. Marie remains frozen. Now. She descends slowly, each step carrying her closer to the wreckage she helped create. Eva looks at her, and Marie sees the truth arrive in her mother's eyes. You found the letter, Eva says. Marie cannot answer. You took it to him. Still nothing. Eva's mouth opens, but no sound comes. Hurt passes across her face so quickly Marie almost misses it. Not anger. Betrayal. Jeanne looks from one to the other. She knew? I saw you in the woods, Marie says. The words break loose. I saw both of you. I knew you were lying. Eva steps closer. Marie, listen to me. No. You don't understand what happened. That's what everyone says. Her voice rises. Months of confusion pour out at once. The secret walks. The quiet looks. The way Alexandre spoke to her as if she mattered, then looked at Eva as if no one else existed. I loved him too. Silence. The confession hangs in the room, small and terrible. Jeanne closes his eyes. Eva's anger vanishes. She sees her daughter at last. Not as a witness, not as an enemy, but as a child trapped inside feelings too large for her body. Oh, Marie! She reaches out. Marie steps away. Outside, a motor growls along the road. Headlights sweep across the windows. Then another vehicle follows. Doors slam in the village square. Men shout names. Somewhere, a dog begins barking wildly. Jeanne moves to the window and pulls the curtain aside. 2 military trucks have stopped near the cafe. The radio announcement has become real. Men are being ordered to report. Families spill into the street. Mothers hold coats around sleeping children. Fathers stand beneath lantern light, pretending not to be afraid. Then someone pounds on the front door. 3 hard blows. Jeanne opens it to find the mayor holding a list. All men of service age, he says. Immediately, Jeanne glances back at Eva and Marie. For 1 second, none of them remembers the letter. The mayor lowers his voice. And tell the doctor he should leave before dawn. Eva goes pale. Why? Marie asks. The mayor looks at her, then away. Some people are already asking questions. He hurries to the next house. Jeanne takes his coat from the hook. Eva catches his arm. You can't go like this. I have to. Jeanne, he pulls free. You wanted another life. Perhaps now you'll have one. The words land harder than a slap. Marie runs to him. Papa, don't leave. His hand rests on her hair. For a moment, he is the father she knows. Warm, familiar, safe. Then his eyes shift toward Eva. Take care of your mother. He walks into the night. The road fills with men carrying bags, rifles, and unfinished goodbyes. Marie watches until her father disappears among them. Behind her, Eva is already moving. She gathers bread, money, and a blanket. Her hands shake as she stuffs everything into a bag. What are you doing? Alexandre has to leave. Marie's stomach twists. Where? Anywhere they can't find him. Eva pulls on her coat and opens the door. Marie blocks her. For one unbearable second, mother and daughter face each other while engines roar beyond the houses. If you go to him, Marie whispers, Papa may never forgive you. Eva's eyes fill, but her voice stays steady. If I don't, Alexandre may not live long enough to be forgiven. Then she steps past her daughter and runs into the darkness. Marie stands alone, listening to her mother's footsteps fade. At the end of the road, another truck turns toward the doctor's house, and this one carries armed men. Marie does not think. She runs. The village road is dark except for the truck's headlights cutting across stone walls and shuttered windows. Gravel bites through the thin soles of her shoes. Ahead, Eva disappears between 2 houses, clutching the bag against her chest. Marie follows, lungs burning, one hand pressed to her side. The truck stops outside Alexandre's clinic. 4 armed men climb down. They move without hurry. That is what makes them terrifying. One carries a lantern. Another holds a folded paper. A third walks straight to the clinic door and strikes it with the butt of his rifle. Dr. Alexandre! No answer. Again, the wood shakes. Eva pulls Marie behind a rain barrel near the alley. Her breath comes fast, but her eyes remain fixed on the clinic. "You shouldn't be here," she whispers. "Neither should you." For a second, anger flashes between them. Then the front door splinters. The men enter. Drawers slam. Glass breaks. Medicine bottles shatter across the floor, filling the air with a sharp, bitter smell. The lantern moves from room to room like a restless eye. But Alexandre is not there. Eva grabs Marie's hand and runs toward the back garden. They find him crouched beside the stable wall with his medical case and a heavy coat. His face changes when he sees them. "You came." Eva pushes the bag into his arms. "There's food. Money. Take the path beyond the river. My mother says it leads to the old railway." Alexandre looks at Marie. No one speaks. Everything Marie felt for him seems painfully distant now. The jealousy, the humiliation, the foolish dream that kindness meant love. In front of her stands not the man she imagined, but a frightened human being whose life may end because of a name, a faith, and the hatred of strangers. "I'm sorry," she says. Alexandre's eyes soften. "You're growing up," he replies. The words do not comfort her. Growing up has not made anything clearer. It has only taught her that adults can love and wound each other at the same time, that fear can turn neighbors into enemies, that truth, once released, cannot be folded neatly back into an envelope. A shout comes from the clinic. Footsteps cross the garden. Eva points toward the trees. "Go!" Alexandre takes one step, then turns back. He touches her face with his gloved hand. No kiss, no promise. Just a final look filled with everything they cannot say. Then he runs. The armed men burst through the rear door. Marie moves before her mother can stop her. "He went toward the square," she shouts, pointing in the opposite direction. The men hesitate. One seizes her shoulder. "Who?" "The doctor. I saw him." Her voice nearly breaks, but she forces herself to meet his eyes. Behind them, Eva stands perfectly still. The officer releases Marie and orders the others toward the square. Boots pound away. The truck engine roars. Within moments, the garden is dark again. Only then do Marie's legs give way. Eva catches her before she falls. For a while, mother and daughter remain on the cold ground, holding each other beneath the trees. Neither apologizes. Not yet. Some wounds are too fresh for words. But Eva strokes Marie's hair, and Marie does not pull away. By morning, Alexandre is gone. No one knows whether he reached the railway. Some say he crossed the border. Others claim soldiers found him days later. The village produces 100 stories because the truth is unbearable and silence is worse. Jeanne sends one letter from the front. It is addressed to Marie. He tells her to obey her grandmother, to help her mother, and to remember that fear makes people cruel unless they fight it. He does not mention Eva. He does not mention Alexandre. At the bottom, he writes only, "You are no longer a little girl." Marie reads the sentence beside the river. Summer is ending. The fields have lost their bright color. Trucks pass more often now, and every radio carries another warning. Across the water, the place where Eva once stood with Alexandre looks ordinary again. That surprises Marie most. The world does not mark the places where childhood ends. There are no signs, no bells. Just a quiet moment when the person you were can no longer survive what you now understand. Eva approaches and sits beside her. Marie gives her the letter. Their shoulders touch. Far beyond the trees, a train whistles once, then disappears into the distance. Marie listens until the sound is gone, and for the first time, she does not mistake longing for love. Jeanne Moreau had already become one of the defining faces of modern European cinema before she directed The Adolescent. Through films such as Elevator to the Gallows, Jules and Jim, La Notte, and Chimes at Midnight, she had worked with filmmakers who treated the human face as a landscape of secrets. Moreau absorbed those lessons. Yet, when she moved behind the camera, she did not imitate Louis Malle, François Truffaut, Michelangelo Antonioni, or Orson Welles. She turned inward, building a cinema less interested in grand declarations than in the instant when a private feeling becomes impossible to ignore. The Adolescent, released in France in January 1979, was Moreau's second narrative feature as director after Lumiere. That matters because she was no celebrity tourist borrowing a director's chair for prestige. Her first film had explored women whose identities were shaped, and sometimes damaged, by performance, desire, and the expectations surrounding them. Her second shifts the viewpoint backward, asking where that complicated emotional education begins. The answer is Marie, a 12-year-old girl spending the summer of 1939 with her family in rural France, standing at the exact point where childhood language starts translating itself into adult meaning. Moreau developed the screenplay with novelist Henriette Jelinek, whom she invited to California to work with her. Her description of the project was precise. She wanted to capture the dangerous passage from childhood into femininity, when adult conversations suddenly stop sounding like mysterious codes. That idea becomes the film's governing principle. Marie does not simply discover romance. She discovers interpretation. A look between adults is no longer just a look. A silence may conceal betrayal. A joke may carry sexual meaning. Knowledge arrives unevenly, and Moreau understands that awakening is both thrilling and cruel because comprehension develops faster than emotional protection. The film carries autobiographical traces without becoming a disguised memoir. As a child, Moreau spent holidays in Mazarat, a tiny village in central France, and later accounts have connected Marie's grandmother and rural environment to those memories. The resemblance gives the movie its tactile intimacy. Summer does not feel designed for the camera, but remembered through sensation. Meals stretch into conversation. Domestic rituals become mysterious ceremonies. Adults seem enormous until their weaknesses suddenly make them small. Moreau is not reconstructing childhood as factual history. She is reconstructing its emotional proportions. The strange period when a kitchen, a garden, or a whispered argument can contain an entire universe. Then comes Moreau's sharpest creative decision, setting this intimate awakening during the summer of 1939. She described the period as a fragile peace overshadowed by the approaching catastrophe in Europe. The historical background is never merely decorative. Marie's innocence is ending while France's illusion of safety is ending too. Private desire and public history move toward rupture together. Villagers continue eating, flirting, gossiping, and celebrating, yet war presses against every cheerful image. That contrast gives the film its ache. Everyone behaves as though summer will continue. We know it will not. The sunlight becomes beautiful because it is already disappearing. Getting such a delicate film made required stubbornness. The Adolescent was organized as an independent production, with technicians and performers working through a cooperative arrangement, while Moreau and producer Philippe Dussart reportedly spent more than a year seeking financing. That production model suited the material. A conventional studio might have pushed the story toward scandal, melodrama, or sentimental nostalgia. Moreau instead protects its ambiguity. Attraction can be innocent and dangerous at once. Adults may behave selfishly without becoming monsters. Marie's confusion is never reduced to a lesson neatly learned. The film's independence is visible in its refusal to explain every emotion for the audience. Moreau's greatest achievement is her gaze. Coming-of-age films about young women have often been filtered through adult male fantasy, turning awakening into spectacle. Moreau does the opposite. The camera remains alert to Marie's curiosity without sexualizing her confusion. Desire is presented as a new way of seeing, not an invitation for the audience to possess what Marie sees. Even the adults are observed with unusual compassion. They are not wise gatekeepers standing above childhood. They are impulsive, lonely people improvising their lives, barely more certain than the girl watching them. That quiet reversal gives the movie its moral intelligence. So The Adolescent begins with a filmmaker reclaiming authorship over experiences she had spent years embodying for other directors. Moreau takes the sensuality, ambiguity, and female interiority associated with her acting career and reorganizes them around a child's developing consciousness. The result feels gentle, but never harmless. Beneath the pastoral surfaces lies a world of adultery, social judgment, anti-Semitism, and approaching war. Moreau's vision establishes that emotional terrain. But vision alone cannot determine when each secret surfaces, whose eyes discover it, or how innocence is gradually dismantled. That architecture belongs to the screenplay. But vision needed a structure, and Moreau found that structure through collaboration. She invited novelist Henriette Jelinek to join her in California, where they developed the screenplay and dialogue together. Their central question was not simply how a child experiences first love. It was more unsettling. What happens when the language of adults suddenly becomes understandable? Marie has spent 12 years hearing fragments, innuendo, gossip, flirtation, marital tension, without possessing the emotional vocabulary to decode them. During one summer, the code begins to break. Words acquire second meanings. Glances become evidence. Silence becomes confession. Childhood does not end with a single dramatic event. It ends through comprehension. The screenplay begins on July 14, 1939, as 12-year-old Marie prepares for her annual holiday at her paternal grandmother's home in central France. It then follows the season towards September and the declaration of war. That calendar supplies the film with an invisible three-act structure: arrival, transformation, departure. Marie enters the countryside still playing easily with children her own age. She leaves altered by puberty, romantic longing, jealousy, mortality, and her discovery that the adults surrounding her are capable of deception. The plot moves quietly, but the emotional distance between the girl who arrives and the girl who departs is enormous. Moreau and Jelinek resist the machinery of a conventional coming-of-age drama. There is no single villain, no grand rebellion, and no speech in which Marie announces that she has grown up. The screenplay accumulates impressions instead. A village scandal involving an unmarried mother introduces the gap between private desire and public morality. Marie's attraction to Alexandre, the young Jewish doctor, gives her emotions a direction she cannot yet control. Her mother's clandestine involvement with the same man turns innocent infatuation into humiliation and jealousy. These incidents overlap, rather than line up neatly, because emotional education rarely respects dramatic order. Marie learns several painful truths at once. Here is what makes the writing so perceptive. Marie misunderstands events without being written as foolish. She sees accurately but interprets incompletely. That distinction matters. Many films create childlike innocence by making young characters oblivious. The Adolescent makes innocence a shortage of context. Marie notices attraction between adults. She senses tension in her parents' marriage. She understands that certain conversations stop when she enters the room. What she lacks is the experience to connect observation with consequence. The audience often reaches the truth moments before she does, and that narrow distance creates tenderness rather than suspense. We are not waiting for a twist. We are watching awareness catch up with perception. The dialogue operates on two levels throughout. Adults speak to one another, but Marie listens from the edges, collecting phrases that were never intended for her. Casual village conversation becomes a form of education, though nobody has volunteered to be her teacher. Gossip teaches her about shame. Her parents teach her that marriage does not eliminate desire. Alexandre teaches her, mostly through boundaries and restraint, that wanting someone does not create a mutual relationship. Mamie teaches something gentler. Knowledge does not always require punishment. Each adult offers Marie a different model of how people survive their appetites, disappointments, and contradictions. That is why the grandmother is so important to the screenplay's balance. Without her, the story could become a catalog of disillusionment. Mamie sees more than Marie suspects, yet she does not rush to expose every secret. Her folk rituals, talk of spells, and acceptance of village irrationality create an alternative language beside adult hypocrisy. Roger Ebert observed that the grandmother's protection allows Marie to pass through emotional danger without being completely hardened by it. The film does not preserve her ignorance. That would be impossible. It preserves her capacity for wonder. Knowledge arrives, but cynicism does not automatically follow. The 1939 setting deepens this pattern through dramatic irony. Marie cannot fully understand the emotional danger around her, while many villagers cannot, or will not, understand the historical danger gathering beyond them. Alexandre's Jewish identity makes the coming war personal before it becomes visible. Summer dances, meals, bicycle rides, pregnancies, and affairs continue beneath a shadow the audience recognizes immediately. Moreau described the period as a false and trembling peace, and the screenplay uses that knowledge without turning history into a lecture. War remains mostly at the margins until those margins begin closing in. The writing occasionally risks excessive gentleness. Its episodic rhythm may feel loose to viewers expecting escalating conflict, and its sympathy for nearly everyone can soften the consequences of adult selfishness. Yet that softness is not evasiveness. It reflects Marie's limited point of view and Mamie's refusal to reduce people to their worst behavior. Moreau and Jelinek build the story like remembered summer, scattered encounters, overheard sentences, sudden embarrassments, moments whose importance becomes clear only later. The screenplay provides the emotional blueprint, but its delicacy depended on finding performers who could suggest entire histories without explaining them. And the search for Marie would become the most crucial casting decision of all. The casting of the Adolescent began not with Marie, but with Mamie. Simone Signoret was the first performer Jeanne Moreau chose, and accounts preserved by the Lumiere Festival and Premier's plans say Moreau created the grandmother specifically for her, then organized the production and 27 other performers around that decision. That is an extraordinary reversal. In a conventional coming-of-age film, the child would be cast first, and everyone else positioned around her. Moreau instead anchored the story in the person who protects childhood while understanding exactly how fragile it is. Mamie would become the film's emotional gravity, so Signoret had to be secured before the rest of the family could take shape. The choice carried enormous cultural weight. Signoret was not merely a respected actress. She was one of French cinema's defining presences, associated with roles that carried experience, political awareness, sensuality, and bruised intelligence. Immediately before The Adolescent, she had won the 1978 César for La Vie Devant Soi. Moreau therefore cast an actress audiences already trusted to contain complicated histories. Mamie can speak playfully about charms and village superstitions, then register adult disappointment with a flicker of the eyes. Signoret's screen identity allows the character to feel wise without becoming saintly. She knows desire creates damage because she has lived, not because the screenplay hands her moral authority. Finding Marie was the opposite challenge. Moreau needed a young performer untouched by the polished habits that often make child acting feel performed rather than experienced. A recollection attributed to the director reports that roughly 40 girls were considered before she met Laetitia Chauveau, then a schoolgirl with no previous acting experience. Documentation surrounding Chauveau's career remains sparse, and The Adolescent is the only screen credit commonly listed for her. That scarcity almost strengthens the casting in retrospect. Chauveau arrives without an established persona. The audience does not watch a recognizable young star illustrating innocence. We watch a face learning what each new emotion means. Her uncertainty belongs to Marie before it belongs to technique. That natural quality had to coexist with performers of formidable experience. Place Chauveau opposite Signoret, and the contrast becomes part of the storytelling. Signoret's face appears to hold decades of memory. Chauveau's seems to be recording everything for the first time. Moreau does not try to erase that imbalance. She uses it. Mamie appears grounded because Marie is still emotionally weightless, pulled toward every new fascination. Their casting creates a silent exchange between accumulated knowledge and awakening consciousness. No speech could explain that relationship as efficiently as the difference between the way these two performers occupy the frame. Francis Huster, cast as Alexandre, brought a different kind of authority. By this point, he had trained at the Conservatoire, worked under Antoine Vitesse, entered the Comédie Française, and become a sociétaire in 1977. His background gave him the bearing of a classical romantic lead, which is precisely what Marie projects onto the village doctor. Yet Huster also appears controlled enough to prevent Alexandre from becoming a fantasy hero. He must be attractive from Marie's perspective while remaining unmistakably adult to ours. That tension is the role. Cast someone more boyish and Marie's obsession might seem almost mutual. Cast someone harsher, and her feelings would look merely naive. Huster occupies the dangerous middle. Edith Clever and Jacques Weber complete Marie's immediate family as Eva and Jean. Clever's reserve gives Eva an emotional distance that Marie cannot decipher, while Weber's more physical, ordinary presence makes Jeanne feel tied to work, appetite, and family routine. Their casting avoids a simple contrast between glamorous mother and dull husband. Eva is restless rather than villainous. Jeanne is limited rather than ridiculous. Alexandre's arrival exposes something already unstable between them. Moreau needed actors who could suggest marital history without receiving long explanatory scenes, and the pairing accomplishes that through temperament. Clever withdraws inward, Weber presses outward. Marie stands between them, reading fragments but missing the full sentence. The official cast records confirm Clever, Weber, Huster, Chauveau, and Signoret as the film's central family and desire constellation. Around them, Moreau assembled a dense village population that included Jean-François Balmer, Hugues Quester, Roger Blin, Maurice Baquet, Isabelle Cédillon, Françoise Bette, Michel Blanc, and numerous others. Even brief roles were entrusted to distinctive performers. That matters because the village cannot feel like scenery populated by anonymous extras. Every face carries rumor, judgment, labor, loneliness, or appetite. Moreau cast the community almost like a chorus in classical theater. Individuals enter briefly, but together they create the social pressure surrounding Marie's private awakening. The large ensemble also keeps the film from shrinking into a neat romantic triangle. Marie is discovering an entire adult ecosystem, not merely her mother's affair. Moreau's casting philosophy ultimately depends on contrast. Newcomer beside legend, theatrical discipline beside untrained spontaneity, youthful projection beside adult restraint. The actors do not simply fit their roles. Their differing levels of experience reproduce the film's central divide between those who already know and the girl who is beginning to understand. Yet casting creates only potential. The real test comes when these performers must translate glances, embarrassment, jealousy, and protection into behavior, and that is where Chauveau, Signoret, Clever, Huster, and Weber begin turning Moreau's delicate design into lived emotion. Laetitia Chauveau's performance works because she never plays Marie as a miniature adult. She does not announce desire with the confidence of someone who already understands it. Instead, attraction first appears as attention. The way Marie watches Alexandre invents reasons to remain near him and studies every gesture for evidence that her feelings might be returned. Chauveau's face is open but not empty. Thought moves across it before language catches up. Roger Ebert described her as clear-eyed and grave, an accurate summary of the unusual seriousness she brings to a character who is still capable of childish excitement. Marie is not pretending to be older. She is frightened that she may already be changing. The performance's greatest strength is its refusal to make awakening look graceful. Marie can appear dreamy in one moment and territorial in the next. Her infatuation with Alexander produces exhilaration, embarrassment, jealousy, and a sudden cruelty toward her mother, often before she understands why she is behaving that way. Chauveau does not smooth those contradictions into a tidy emotional arc. She lets Marie be awkward. Watch how frequently her body and expression seem to disagree. She tries to stand with adult composure, yet her nervousness pulls her back toward childhood. That instability gives the performance its truth. Adolescence here is not a door opening. It is two identities struggling inside the same frame. Moreau reportedly considered around 40 girls before selecting Chauveau, and that search makes sense when you see how dependent the film is on unforced observation. A more polished child actor might have signaled each emotion too clearly. First love here, jealousy there, heartbreak on cue. Chauveau often does less. She pauses. She stares a second too long. She allows confusion to remain confusion. Her relative lack of screen history also helps. The audience brings no established image of her into the film. She seems to grow older before us because, cinematically, she has almost no past. Moreau turns that absence into character. Then there is Simone Signoret, whose Mamie occupies the opposite end of the emotional spectrum. Where Marie is experiencing everything for the first time, Mamie behaves like someone who has already survived every version of the same mistake. Signoret does not perform wisdom as solemnity. She laughs, works, observes, and occasionally allows a silence to become heavier than dialogue. The Lumiere Festival's account says Moreau selected Signoret first and organized the other 27 performers around her. That decision is visible in the finished film. Mamie feels less like one member of the ensemble than the ground beneath it. Signoret's restraint is especially powerful because Mamie understands far more than she chooses to expose. She recognizes Marie's infatuation, senses the adult tensions developing around Alexandre, and knows that public judgment can wound more deeply than private wrongdoing. Yet she rarely turns that knowledge into authority. No lectures. No theatrical confrontations. Her protection is practical and emotional. She gives Marie room to discover painful truths without allowing those truths to define the girl permanently. Ebert called Signoret's performance unshakable, and that is exactly its effect. When the adults become unreliable, Mamie's presence tells us that the film itself has not lost its moral balance. Francis Huster faces a subtler challenge as Alexandre. From Marie's perspective, he must appear romantic enough to justify obsession. From the audience's perspective, he must remain an adult man moving through a world of consequences she cannot yet comprehend. Huster avoids playing him as either seducer or saint. His calmness initially resembles kindness, but it also creates distance. Marie reads attention as intimacy because she has not yet learned that adults can be warm without offering themselves. Huster's controlled presence keeps the relationship from becoming falsely reciprocal. Alexandre may be the center of Marie's fantasy, but Huster never behaves as though he belongs inside it. Edith Clever's Eva brings the film's most uncomfortable emotional mirror. Mother and daughter are drawn toward the same man, but they experience that attraction from opposite sides of knowledge. Clever gives Eva a guarded inward quality. She seems to carry dissatisfaction long before Marie notices it. When Marie begins to sense her mother's involvement with Alexandre, Chauvet's performance changes. Curiosity hardens. The mother is no longer simply a parent but a rival, and that realization is devastating because Marie cannot express it without exposing feelings she barely understands. Clever does not play Eva as a villain stealing her daughter's dream. Her restlessness feels adult, private, and morally compromised. That complexity makes Marie's pain sharper. Jacques Weber, as Jeanne, completes the uneasy family geometry. His direct physical presence contrasts with Clever's withdrawal, suggesting a marriage in which frustration has accumulated beneath routine. The official archival listings place Chauvet, Signoret, Clever, Huster, and Weber at the center of the ensemble, but their importance comes from how differently they process desire. Marie idealizes it, Alexandre contains it, Eva pursues it, Jeanne is threatened by it, and Mamie understands its cost. Together, they turn a gentle rural chronicle into something emotionally dangerous. Yet these central performances gain much of their force from the villagers surrounding them, the watchful, talkative community that transforms every private feeling into public knowledge. Marie's private awakening would feel smaller without the village watching her. Jeanne Moreau surrounds the central family with 27 performers, many appearing only briefly, yet their collective presence changes the nature of the film. They are not decorative peasants arranged to make the countryside picturesque. They gossip, judge, flirt, work, drink, dance, and preserve traditions whose origins nobody bothers to explain. Roger Ebert described the ensemble as a gallery of provincial characters, including scandalized villagers, bistro customers, laborers, and women carrying knowledge that never reaches official conversation. Through them, Marie discovers that adulthood is not one secret waiting to be uncovered. It is an entire network of secrets everyone partly knows. Jean-François Balmer's André, the village carpenter, represents the film's attention to people defined by work rather than exposition. Moreau does not pause the story to provide every supporting character with a biography. She lets posture, clothing, occupation, and local reputation do the work. André belongs to a community where professions are identities: the carpenter, the blacksmith, the road worker, the doctor. Balmer's presence adds nervous social energy, keeping village life from becoming a frozen pastoral painting. The people here are constantly moving through one another's spaces. A workshop becomes a meeting place. A cafe becomes a courtroom. A dance becomes an arena where private tensions suddenly acquire witnesses. Balmer is officially credited as André the Carpenter. Roger Blin and Hugues Quester, playing blacksmith Romain and his son Fred, bring generational texture to that world. Blin's weathered presence suggests a rural order built on repetition, physical labor, and inherited authority. Quester, by contrast, carries younger, less settled energy. Put father and son inside the same community, and Moreau quietly widens Marie's education. Adolescence is not only a girl's passage into desire, it is part of a larger cycle in which children inherit roles, customs, resentments, and assumptions from adults. Fred may have more freedom than Marie, but he is no less shaped by expectation. Their scenes help establish a society where everybody is known through family connections before they have the chance to define themselves independently. Maurice Baquet and Nadine Basile appear as Jules, the road worker, and his wife Rose. These are exactly the kinds of characters another film might reduce to local color. Moreau gives them a different function. Couples like Jules and Rose allow Marie to observe marriage outside the private mythology of her own parents. She begins noticing that every household develops its own arrangement of affection, irritation, loyalty, and disappointment. Adults rarely describe these arrangements honestly. Children learn them by watching who interrupts whom, who laughs too loudly, and who falls silent when a particular name is mentioned. The ensemble, therefore, acts as Marie's unofficial classroom. Nobody sits her down to explain intimacy. The village performs its lessons in public. Françoise Bette's Violette gives those lessons sharper consequences. The unmarried young woman who has recently given birth becomes a subject of communal scandal, confronting Marie with the difference between desire as private feeling and sexuality as public judgment. Ebert singled out this thread when describing the village characters because Violette exposes the cruelty beneath the countryside's apparent warmth. Everyone may know everyone, but familiarity does not guarantee compassion. It can make punishment more efficient. Bette does not need to dominate the film for Violette to matter. Her situation hangs over the community as a warning, especially for a girl beginning to recognize that women and men are not judged by the same rules. Frank Muth's François, identified in cast records as the innocent, occupies another edge of village society. The label is revealing. In a community governed by nicknames and fixed reputations, a person can be reduced to a single trait until the name replaces the individual. Marie is still fluid: child, adolescent, daughter, rival, observer, but the adults around her demonstrate how quickly society hardens identities. The villagers know where François belongs because they have collectively decided it. Moreau's compassion lies in allowing such peripheral figures to remain visible even when the main plot does not require them. Her village contains people who would normally disappear beyond the frame, and their presence makes the setting feel inhabited rather than constructed. The ensemble also contains performers such as Juliette Braque, Isabelle Sadoyan, Bérangère Bonvoisin, Michel Blanc, and Elisabeth Margoni. Moreau uses distinctive faces rather than anonymous background movement, so even a brief appearance can suggest an argument continuing from yesterday or a friendship older than Marie's parents. The result resembles a chorus, but not one speaking with a single moral voice. Some villagers nurture, others condemn, some preserve superstition, others embody changing social habits. Together they create pressure. Marie may believe her emotions belong entirely to her, yet the village teaches her that feelings become dangerous once other people notice them. The official festival record emphasizes the unusually large, carefully selected company surrounding Signoret. That is the ensemble's real achievement. It transforms background into consequence. Moreau understands that growing up means realizing every private act exists within a social world already prepared to interpret it. The villagers make Marie feel protected and observed, welcomed and confined. Their humor prevents the film from becoming solemn. Their judgment keeps its summer warmth from turning sentimental. Even when individual performances last only minutes, they contribute to the sensation of a community continuing beyond Marie's viewpoint. And making that community believable required more than casting. It required houses, workshops, costumes, tools, roads, and colors capable of holding an entire way of life just before history swept it away. The village in The Adolescent feels less like a reconstructed period setting than a place Jeanne Moreau discovered sleeping beneath the modern world. She reportedly searched for a landscape that contemporary life had not completely altered. A community where legends, charms, sacred water, and love potions could still be discussed without irony. She found that atmosphere in the Aveyron region, filming around Castelnau de Mondaye, Mondaye, and Espalion, during August and September 1978. Moreau described the area as naturally peaceful and still inhabited by the past. That quality becomes the foundation of the film's visual world. History is not displayed behind glass. It lingers in stone, wood, silence, and habit. Although Marie's holiday is supposed to take place in central France, Moreau valued emotional authenticity more than geographical literalism. The Aveyron locations provide steep roads, old farm buildings, enclosed interiors, and public spaces that seem to have evolved gradually rather than being designed all at once. Nothing appears too clean. Walls carry age. Workshops contain the clutter of actual labor. Dining rooms feel crowded by furniture accumulated across generations. Production designer Noelle Galland did not impose an obvious decorative concept over these places. Her credited work appears aimed at protecting their irregularity. The village looks inhabited before Marie arrives and capable of continuing after she leaves. That distinction matters. A weaker film would transform rural France into a postcard, a safe paradise against which approaching war appears especially tragic. Moreau's countryside is warmer and more complicated. The landscape offers freedom, but the houses contain secrets. Open fields suggest childhood possibility, while cramped kitchens and bedrooms become spaces of overheard conversations and concealed desire. Marie can run through the countryside with physical freedom, then enter an interior where every adult gesture feels coded. The production design, therefore, does not merely recreate 1939. It divides Marie's world into emotional territories: outdoors for movement and fantasy, indoors for discovery and discomfort. The grandmother's home is the center of that design. It holds practical objects, family rituals, food preparation, folk belief, and the accumulated memory of people who have occupied it for years. Moreau's camera often allows objects to remain visible without announcing their importance. Glasses, dishes, fabric, tools, and worn furniture build a domestic texture that cannot be reduced to one symbolic meaning. They create continuity. Marie is changing quickly, but the house seems to have absorbed countless summers before hers. Mamie belongs to it because Simone Signoret moves through its rooms without hesitation, as though every object has a history she could explain but chooses not to. The costumes operate with similar restraint. Michel Cerf is credited for costume design, with Melusine Chamber and Christiane Marmande also listed among the costume team. Their work separates generations and social roles without making the characters resemble models in a historical pageant. Marie's clothes retain the simplicity and mobility of childhood, yet certain silhouettes begin suggesting the femininity she is becoming conscious of. Eva's clothing carries greater adult control, making the mother appear composed even when her private life is becoming unstable. Mamie's wardrobe feels rooted in labor, age, and routine. Costume becomes psychology worn lightly. Moreau also understands that period accuracy is not achieved by placing antique objects in every corner. It comes from showing how people use things. A tool is convincing because a worker handles it naturally. A table gains history from the way a family gathers around it. Clothing feels authentic because bodies have relaxed into it. This is where the large supporting ensemble becomes crucial. The villagers occupy the spaces rather than posing inside them. Their movements produce the sense that work continues beyond the boundaries of each scene. The carpenter's shop, the blacksmith's area, the road, and the cafe all belong to a functioning economy, not merely to the plot. Color deepens the film's tension between memory and history. The countryside is often associated with warm earth, vegetation, pale summer light, and the muted tones of old interiors. Yet Moreau does not polish those colors into nostalgic sweetness. The warmth is vulnerable. Because the story unfolds during the final summer before war, every inviting texture carries an expiration date. The village appears durable, but the audience knows its social order is about to be shaken. Moreau called 1939 a moment of false, trembling peace beneath a darkening European cloud. The sets and landscapes embody that contradiction. Solid enough to seem permanent, fragile enough to become memory. The physical world also preserves superstition beside modernity. Alexandre brings scientific authority as a doctor, while Mamie and the village maintain rituals associated with spells, healing traditions, and inherited belief. Moreau does not reduce this contrast to reason defeating ignorance. The old practices give the community poetry and continuity. Modern knowledge cannot answer every emotional question Marie encounters. A love potion may not control desire, but neither does medicine. The design allows both systems to inhabit the same village, doctor's instruments beside household charms, rational conversation beside whispered legend. That is why the production design feels so essential. Galland and the costume team do not simply provide an attractive background for Marie's awakening. They construct a world old enough to contain mystery and specific enough to make its disappearance painful. Every road, dress, workshop, and weathered wall strengthens Moreau's central idea. Marie is leaving childhood at the same moment Europe is leaving peace, but this environment achieves its full emotional force through the way it is photographed. Through camera distance, movement, light, and the uneasy gaze that follows Marie as she begins looking at everything differently. The most revealing image in The Adolescent is not a grand landscape or an elaborate period composition. It is Marie looking. Jeanne Moreau and cinematographer Pierre Gautard build the film around the gradual transformation of that gaze. At first, the countryside appears as a playground filled with movement, sunlight, relatives, and familiar rituals. As Marie begins decoding adult behavior, the same spaces acquire hidden corridors of meaning. A doorway can divide innocence from knowledge. A window can turn curiosity into surveillance. A group of adults can become threatening simply because Marie realizes their conversation excludes her. The world barely changes. Her way of framing it does. Gautard is credited as the film's director of photography, working in color on a 35mm production. Moreau avoids imposing a flashy visual signature on Marie's awakening. There are no aggressive camera tricks announcing that childhood has ended. Instead, the camera alternates between fluid observation and a more hesitant stillness. A Geneva Cinéma du Grutli program described its movements as sometimes smooth, sometimes restrained and uncertain, as though the camera itself were probing the mystery of transition. That is exactly the sensation the film needs. Marie is pulled forward by curiosity, then stopped by embarrassment or incomplete understanding. The camera follows that emotional rhythm: approach, pause, retreat. It does not merely record her uncertainty. It begins to behave like uncertainty. The visual distance between Marie and the adults is carefully controlled. Moreau frequently allows her to remain near adult activity without fully belonging inside it. She watches from the edge of gatherings, catches fragments of behavior, or studies faces whose expressions mean more to the audience than they do to her. These compositions make knowledge spatial. Adults occupy one zone. Marie occupies another, sometimes only a doorway, table, or few feet of floor separates them, but emotionally the distance is enormous. As she understands more, that separation narrows. The shift is subtle. Marie does not physically enter adulthood, of course, but the camera increasingly allows her observations to carry adult consequences. Goddard's photography also protects the film from becoming a sentimental rural fantasy. The summer light is warm, yet the image is not polished into advertising perfection. A later review of the restored Blu-ray noted that the photography retains a slightly diffused quality while preserving strong detail and definition. That softness suits Moreau's memory-based approach. Surfaces seem touched by recollection without dissolving into dream. The stone buildings, vegetation, clothes, and faces remain tangible. This is not an imaginary paradise. People work here, bodies age here, women are judged here, desire creates real damage. The image can be tender without lying about the society it depicts. Watch how differently the film treats open landscapes and enclosed rooms. Outdoors, Marie's body can move freely. Roads, fields, and village paths give her curiosity somewhere to travel. Indoors, compositions become denser. Furniture, walls, and other bodies limit her movement, turning observation into pressure. A family meal may look communal while trapping each person inside unspoken tension. Moreau understands that intimacy is not the same as closeness. Sometimes the tighter the family grouping, the more isolated Marie appears. The visual design therefore reverses a familiar assumption. The countryside is not automatically confining, and the home is not automatically safe. Freedom and danger depend on what Marie has begun to notice. Faces carry more narrative weight than spectacle. That choice reflects Moreau's own history as an actress filmed by directors fascinated with her ability to suggest thought before speech. Here she extends the same respect to Chauveau, Signoret, Clever, Huster, and Weber. Godard's camera gives expressions time to develop rather than cutting immediately toward explanation. Marie studies Alexandre. Mamie studies Marie. Eva looks away. Jean registers attention he may not yet be prepared to name. Each line of looking creates another layer of information. Moreau understands that a reaction shot is not merely a response to dialogue. It can reveal who possesses knowledge, who suspects it, and who remains excluded. The film's 1939 setting introduces a second visual perspective, ours. Marie sees summer. The audience sees the last summer before war. An ordinary village gathering, therefore, contains dramatic irony even when nothing overtly political occurs. The landscape looks durable, but history has already sentenced its peace. Moreau described the period as a false and trembling calm beneath the dark cloud gathering over Europe. Godard does not need to fill the horizon with threatening imagery. The approaching rupture exists in our knowledge of what comes next. The brighter the afternoon, the more temporary it feels. That restraint defines the cinematography's moral intelligence. Moreau refuses to sexualize Marie's awakening, even when the story concerns her growing awareness of bodies and desire. The camera remains curious without becoming predatory. It observes her changing consciousness rather than presenting her as an object transformed for adult attention. Janet Maslin later praised Moreau's treatment for avoiding the lascivious quality male directors often brought to such material. The distinction is fundamental. We experience the disturbance of Marie's gaze, not the pleasure of possessing her image. Godard and Moreau ultimately make cinematography serve perception. Camera movement, visual distance, softened color, and layered compositions all chart the passage from seeing to understanding. Nothing announces itself loudly. That is why it lingers. Marie begins the summer surrounded by images she accepts at face value. She ends it aware that every image may conceal another story. Yet what the eye discovers, the ear often senses first. Before Marie fully understands danger, desire, or loss, Philippe Sard's music and the film's surrounding sounds have already taught us how fragile this summer really is. The soundtrack album for The Adolescent lasts barely 24 minutes, yet its track titles map Marie's emotional journey with almost embarrassing clarity. The meeting, jealousy, the discovery, love, and finally, return to the country. Philippe Sard does not compose as though Marie's awakening were an epic romance. He treats it as a collection of sensations too new for her to name. The music gives those sensations temporary shapes before they become thoughts. A melody can express longing, while Marie still calls it curiosity. A darker turn can register jealousy before she admits that her mother has become a rival. The score speaks the emotional language she has not yet learned. Sard was already one of French cinema's most adaptable composers when Jeanne Moreau brought him into the project, but The Adolescent requires him to resist musical grandeur. The film's world is intimate. Rooms, roads, gardens, village gatherings, whispered suspicions. A heavy orchestral score would tell Marie what to feel before she has discovered it herself. Sard instead works as an emotional counterpoint, gently coloring memory without turning the countryside into paradise. His themes carry warmth, but that warmth is unstable. The summer feels lyrical because it is ending. Childhood feels precious because Marie is already losing access to it. Sard's original music credit sits beside Dominique Dalmasso's sound work in the Cinémathèque Française records. The title song makes the collaboration unusually personal. L'Adolescente is performed by Jeanne Moreau and singer-songwriter Yves Duté, with words credited to Moreau and orchestration by Jean Musi. Moreau's participation matters because her voice had always been one of her most recognizable instruments. Low, textured, intimate, carrying both fatigue and seduction. Here, that voice does not belong to an on-screen character. It hovers above the film like adult memory addressing a younger self. Duté's presence softens the effect into a shared reflection rather than a solitary confession. The song does not simply advertise the movie's theme. It connects Moreau the director, Moreau the performer, and Moreau the woman remembering childhood. Moreau also provides the film's voiceover, another choice that creates distance between experience and recollection. The young Marie lives events without understanding their full meaning. The older voice carries the knowledge that time has added. Yet narration does not crush the images beneath explanation. Its function is closer to memory's echo. We hear adulthood looking backward while watching childhood move forward. That split gives even ordinary moments a strange sadness. Marie may believe she is entering a romance, but the voice surrounding her belongs to someone who knows that first desire is often remembered less for fulfillment than for the shock of discovering one's own vulnerability. Moreau's official archive credits her voiceover alongside Sard's music and the sound team of Dalmasso and Jacques Momont. The Valse du 14 Juillet gives the score a more public identity. The original release credits accordionist Marcel Azola and violinist Stéphane Grappelli, with Hubert Rostaing arranging and Carlo Savina conducting. Those names bring genuine musical personality to what could have been generic period decoration. The waltz evokes communal celebration, the dance, the holiday, bodies moving together under the illusion that ordinary life remains secure. But the date carries historical irony. July 14, 1939 belongs to a France still celebrating itself only weeks before war overturns the social world Moreau has reconstructed. The music dances in the present while the audience hears the future approaching. This contrast between public sound and private feeling runs through the film. Village noise creates belonging. Conversation around tables, footsteps, labor, children playing, music at gatherings. Yet those same sounds can become oppressive once Marie realizes that communities listen as eagerly as they speak. Gossip travels through voices. Judgment gathers in murmurs. A crowded celebration can make loneliness more visible because everyone appears connected, except the person struggling to understand what she has seen. Sound, therefore, enlarges the village beyond the frame. Even when Moreau concentrates on one face, the voices surrounding it remind us that private behavior is always vulnerable to public interpretation. Silence carries the opposite force. Moreau does not treat silence as emptiness. She uses it as the space where Marie's incomplete understanding gathers pressure. After a revealing look or overheard phrase, the absence of explanation becomes more disturbing than an argument. Adults often protect themselves by refusing to say what Marie already suspects. Mamie's pauses communicate recognition without humiliation. Eva's silences conceal desire. Alexandre's restraint creates a boundary Marie cannot yet interpret correctly. The sound design allows these pauses to remain uncomfortable, rather than filling them with continuous music. That choice respects the actors. A face is permitted to hold uncertainty while the room seems to wait. The score's titles even suggest this progression from emotional fantasy toward consequence. Voyage Imaginaire points toward Marie's invented romance. La Rencontre gives that fantasy a human object. La Jalousie and La Découverte dismantle it. Grand Départ and Retour aux Pays turn movement itself into loss. These titles do not prove that every cue functions as a literal chapter, but they expose Sard's dramatic design. He is composing not merely for events, but for stages of recognition. The music begins where Marie imagines herself going and ends where memory knows she has been. What the soundtrack finally preserves is the sound of a temporary world. The accordion, violin, voices, rural ambience, and carefully protected silences hold summer together even as desire and history pull it apart. Sard does not make Marie's feelings larger than life. He makes them sound as large as they feel to her. And Moreau's own voice reminds us that someone survived this confusion long enough to remember it tenderly. That emotional precision seems effortless on screen, but the production itself demanded independent financing, an unusually cooperative company, location work, and a director attempting to guide a newcomer beside some of Europe's most formidable actors. The real production drama behind The Adolescent was not an on-set catastrophe. It happened before the cameras could even roll. Jeanne Moreau and producer Philippe Dussart spent more than a year searching for financing, eventually assembling the film as an independent French-West German production involving Carthago Films, Janus Film, Sud-West Funk, and associated producer Tarak Ben Ammar. More unusually, The technicians and performers were organized through a cooperative arrangement. That structure suggests a project sustained less by commercial certainty than by collective belief. Moreau was a major international star, yet her reputation did not automatically make a quiet, female-centered period drama easy to finance. Celebrity opened doors. It did not remove the risk. The cooperative model fits the film's personality. The Adolescent does not feel manufactured by a hierarchy in which every creative decision has been polished toward marketability. It feels assembled by people protecting a delicate tone together. The cast included Simone Signoret, Frances Huster, Edith Clever, Jacques Weber, Jean-François Balmer, Roger Blin, Michel Blanc, and numerous others, while the crew brought together cinematographer Pierre Gautard, production designer Noël Galland, composer Philippe Sard, and editors Albert Jurgensen and Colette Lelou. The film may be intimate, but the machinery required to make that intimacy convincing was extensive. Moreau's achievement was keeping the machinery from showing. Location hunting became one of the production's defining creative decisions. Moreau said she had searched for a place not yet damaged by modern life, where talk of witches, sacred water, and love potions could still feel ordinary. Following advice from a friend she described as somewhat mediumistic, she explored the Aubrac region and found Mondaï. The choice was not merely aesthetic. A freshly constructed old village might have reproduced the architecture, but it could not reproduce the relationship between landscape and belief. Moreau needed a location where superstition seemed to rise naturally from the earth. Mondaï supplied not only buildings and roads, but a surviving atmosphere. Filming took place around Castelnau, Mondaï, and Espalion in the Aveyron during August and September 1978. The timing allowed the production to capture the late summer quality essential to the story. Warmth beginning to fade, vegetation moving toward autumn, and a holiday season approaching its end. That natural transition quietly serves the drama. Marie's childhood is disappearing at the same speed as the summer light. Moreau and Gautard did not have to manufacture every trace of melancholy because the season was already providing it. The schedule and landscape became collaborators, giving the film an emotional clock that could be felt even when no character mentioned time. Local memories suggest that Moreau's arrival turned the shoot into a genuine community event. Simone Anglade, then mayor of Castelnau-de-Mondaï, later remembered Moreau as energetic, temperamental in the positive sense, approachable, and warm. Anglade initially dismissed news of the production as an April Fool's joke, only to see Moreau arrive with an imposing company of actors and technicians. The filmmakers invited local people onto the set and reportedly erected a large tent at Bousquet Dolt so cast, crew, and residents could spend 3 evenings together. That anecdote says more about the production than a list of equipment ever could. The village was not treated merely as rentable scenery. Moreau also had to coordinate radically different kinds of performers. Signoret was the first actress selected, and the grandmother was created for her. The rest of the film and its 27 additional performers were then organized around that decision. At the center stood Laetitia Chauveau, a first-time young lead surrounded by actors carrying decades of theatrical and cinematic experience. That imbalance could have crushed the film. Instead, Moreau turned it into an advantage. Chauveau's uncertainty belonged naturally to Marie, while Signoret's confidence gave the production an emotional anchor. Directing them required different forms of attention. One performance needed space to remain instinctive. The other needed freedom to use accumulated craft without dominating the child's perspective. The set also contained careers at strikingly different stages. Among the villagers was Michel Blanc, not yet the major comic and dramatic figure he would become. Aura Atika appeared as a small child in what the Lumiere Festival identifies as her first screen role, filmed when she was 9. Moreau's company therefore brought together established icons, experienced character actors, relative newcomers, and children. That variety strengthens the finished film because the village never appears populated by performers drawn from a single professional world. Some faces command attention immediately. Others pass almost anonymously through the background. Together, they create the uneven social texture of an actual community. There are few well-documented stories of conflict, injury, or technical disaster from the shoot, and inventing such drama would misrepresent the production. The struggle lay elsewhere: finding money, protecting a non-commercial tone, coordinating a large ensemble, and preserving the historical character of real locations. Moreau's on-set achievement was therefore one of control without visible strain. The final film feels unhurried, but it was produced through careful organization. 3 assistant directors, a full sound department, dedicated costume and makeup teams, location management, and a substantial technical crew working behind its apparent simplicity. Calm on screen was not the absence of labor. It was the result of labor being concealed. That may be the most revealing behind-the-scenes fact of all. The Adolescent appears fragile, almost weightless, yet it survived a year-long financing search, cross-border production arrangements, location work, and the challenge of balancing a novice lead against some of Europe's strongest actors. Moreau created a set whose communal spirit mirrored the village she was filming, while her discipline kept nostalgia from dissolving into sentimentality. The production journey explains why the movie feels personal rather than small. But personal cinema must still enter the marketplace, and the next question is harsher. What happened when this quiet summer memory met distributors, ticket buyers, and the commercial realities of 1979? Commercially, The Adolescent occupies an awkward but revealing middle ground. It was not a major popular success, yet neither was it an invisible art house failure. The film opened in France on January 24, 1979, carrying the names of Jeanne Moreau and Simone Signoret, 2 performers whose fame could attract attention even though Moreau remained behind the camera. That combination gave distributors a recognizable poster, but not an easily marketable story. A 12-year-old girl's emotional awakening, rural life in 1939, marital betrayal, folk rituals, and approaching war do not compress neatly into a sensational advertising hook. The film asks for curiosity and patience rather than promising spectacle. Its first Paris week produced 37,183 admissions across 21 cinemas. That works out to roughly 771 viewers per screen during the week, a respectable start for a subdued period drama, but hardly the kind of opening that creates national momentum through sheer demand. The number suggests that Moreau's reputation and Signoret's presence succeeded in getting audiences through the door. It also suggests a ceiling. Viewers were interested, but the film did not explode beyond the culturally engaged audience most likely to recognize those names. France measured theatrical performance primarily through admissions, making those attendance figures more informative than an estimated dollar conversion would be. By the end of the 1979 calendar year, CNC-based records list The Adolescent at 430,198 French admissions, placing it 85th among films shown that year. A separate lifetime-oriented database gives a slightly higher total of 437,875 admissions. The difference, 7,677 tickets, is small enough to reflect later playdates, repertory screenings, or differences in how the totals were compiled. The responsible conclusion is therefore not that one figure must be false, but that the film's French theatrical audience settled at approximately 430,000 to 438,000 admissions. For this kind of production, that represents meaningful exposure without becoming a breakout phenomenon. Context makes the scale clearer. France's biggest release of 1979, Le Gendarme et les Extraterrestres, exceeded 6 million admissions. Films such as Apocalypse Now, Superman, Alien, and Moonraker reached audiences counted in the millions, while The Adolescent remained below 500,000. Moreau was not competing creatively with those pictures, but she was competing for the same finite supply of screens, press attention, and movie-going time. Her gentle historical drama entered a marketplace dominated by comedy, action, science fiction, animation, and heavily promoted international productions. Against that noise, subtlety became both the film's artistic identity and its commercial disadvantage. Calling the result a simple failure would still be misleading. Moreau had made a film without conventional stars in the central adolescent role, without action, and without an immediately reassuring genre. Letitia Chauveau was unknown, The narrative unfolded episodically, and the central attraction remained deliberately unfulfilled. Even the presence of Signoret could not transform the material into a typical prestige vehicle because Mamie supports the story rather than dominating it. Around 430,000 admissions indicate that the film reached beyond a tiny specialist circle. People did see it. They simply did not turn it into the broad popular event that its famous director and cast might have encouraged financiers to imagine. Exact budget and marketing costs were not publicly documented in the major accessible box office records, so any confident statement about profit would be invented. The available financial database lists the French release but supplies no usable revenue, budget, or international sales totals. That absence matters. Admissions alone cannot establish profitability because the production involved French and West German partners, cooperative labor arrangements, distribution expenses, exhibitor shares, and possible television participation. A modest theatrical result can be softened by présals and co-production funding, but there is not enough verified information to calculate whether investors recovered their costs. The honest verdict is commercial underperformance relative to star visibility, not a provable financial disaster. The film's international path appears to have been slow rather than expansive. It reached New York in September 1982, more than 3 years after its French premiere, and American reviews continued appearing in 1983. That delay tells its own commercial story. The Adolescent was not exported as an urgent new French sensation. It circulated through specialist distribution, art house exhibition, and critical discovery. Roger Ebert's 1983 review treated the film as a welcome encounter with Moreau's directorial work, which suggests that her fame as an actress remained the primary selling point abroad. The movie traveled through cultural reputation rather than box office heat. Its later commercial life has followed the same pattern. For years, the film remained comparatively difficult to see, surviving through cinémathèque programs, retrospectives, and occasional screenings rather than constant mainstream circulation. That changed materially when the Jeanne Moreau Foundation initiated new restorations of Lumière, The Adolescent, and Lillian Gish. Carlotta Films released the 3 works together in a French Blu-ray set in December 2023 and a United States edition in February 2024, with The Adolescent presented in a new 4K restoration. The film also received a limited Japanese release in October 2024 as part of renewed interest in Moreau as a filmmaker. That restoration history may be the film's most important commercial afterlife. The Adolescent did not generate sequels, merchandise, or a large popular franchise. Its value matured differently. Theatrical admissions made it a modestly seen film in 1979. Preservation and home media reframed it decades later as part of an overlooked directorial career. Money tells one story: a respectable opening, limited momentum, and a final audience far below the year's major successes. Availability tells another. Moreau's film has gradually moved from semi-obscurity toward rediscovery, creating the conditions for critics and viewers to reconsider whether its original commercial modesty reflected artistic limitations, or a culture that was not yet prepared to value the kind of female perspective it offered. Critical reception of The Adolescent has always carried a peculiar imbalance. Reviewers often admired the film, yet the film itself never became central to the public image of Jeanne Moreau. When it entered the official selection of the 29th Berlin International Film Festival in 1979, Moreau was already one of European cinema's most recognizable actors. The festival exposure confirmed that her second feature belonged within serious international cinema, but it did not produce major awards or the kind of controversy that might have secured a louder cultural afterlife. Respect arrived. Canonization did not. The director remained hidden behind the legend of the actress. American critics encountered the film slowly because its United States release followed several years after the French premiere. Janet Maslin's New York Times review praised Moreau's handling of Marie's sexual awakening without the voyeuristic softness that male filmmakers frequently imposed on adolescent girls. Her emphasis was not simply that Moreau treated the subject tastefully. It was that the film's straightforwardness changed who controlled the gaze. Marie's body is not presented as a mystery for adult viewers to consume. Her confusion becomes the emotional point of access. Maslin recognized what now appears to be the film's defining achievement. It allows female adolescence to exist without translating it into male fantasy. Roger Ebert responded with similar warmth, awarding the film 3.5 stars. He admired its subtlety and the way adult undercurrents gradually become visible through both Marie's perspective and the audience's more experienced understanding. Ebert also identified Moreau's lack of directorial exhibitionism. The film gives attention to its characters rather than demanding applause for technique. That restraint could be mistaken for simplicity, but it is actually a difficult form of control. Moreau knows that a dramatic camera move or aggressively symbolic cut might overwhelm the fragile uncertainty Chauveau is creating. She keeps the style quiet, because Marie's emotional noise is already loud enough. Not every response was completely comfortable. The Christian Science Monitor described Moreau's touch as delicate, while suggesting that portions of the plot moved beyond taste and restraint. That reservation points to the film's most persistent critical tension. Some viewers see Mamie's tolerance, the mother's affair, and the handling of Marie's attempted seduction as humane complexity. Others may feel Moreau's gentleness risks softening adult irresponsibility. The movie refuses to convert every dangerous situation into punishment or trauma, which can appear compassionate or evasive depending on the viewer. That division has not disappeared. It remains built into the film's moral design. There is another criticism that deserves attention. The film can appear almost too classical. Moreau had been one of the faces of cinematic modernity, associated with the fractured emotions and formal daring of the Nouvelle Vague and European art cinema. Yet The Adolescent unfolds as a lyrical rural chronicle, complete with voiceover, seasonal imagery, village characters, and remembered rituals. Some later viewers have found that contrast surprising, even conservative, but the classical surface is deceptive. Moreau uses familiar forms to shift authority toward experiences those traditions frequently distorted: the inner life of a girl, the intelligence of older women, and the uneasy continuity between female generations. Modern review aggregators cannot offer a meaningful numerical consensus. Rotten Tomatoes currently lists only 3 professional reviews, too few to generate a representative score, while audience participation also remains limited. That absence says more about availability than quality. For decades, the movie circulated unevenly through art house engagements, archives, and retrospectives rather than regular television broadcasts or widely distributed home video. It never gathered the review volume that more accessible classics accumulate over time. The sparse data, therefore, should not be mistaken for rejection. The film was not endlessly debated, because many potential viewers simply had little opportunity to see it. The major reevaluation began when restored versions of Moreau's directorial work returned to cinemas. A 4K restoration of The Adolescent, created from the original 35mm negative, was presented during the 2023 Jeanne Moreau Cinéaste programs at venues including Film Forum and the American Cinematheque. Criterion's David Hudson framed these events around 3 rarely seen Moreau-directed features, effectively challenging the habit of treating her filmmaking as a footnote. Retrospectives in France and abroad now place The Adolescent beside Lumière and Lillian Gish, revealing a small but coherent body of work concerned with women looking, remembering, performing, and surviving. That rediscovery has altered the film's cultural position. It is increasingly valued not only as a sensitive coming-of-age story, but as evidence that Moreau understood the politics of looking from both sides of the camera. She had spent decades being photographed as an object of desire, mystery, rebellion, and intellectual fascination. In The Adolescent, she gives visual authority to the girl doing the looking. The film's reputation remains modest, and its gentleness will still frustrate viewers seeking sharper confrontation. Yet time has strengthened its central insight. Growing up begins when the adult world stops appearing coherent. The final question is what Moreau believes should survive that discovery, and what Marie's Summer says about innocence, memory, womanhood, and a civilization approaching war. The film's ending, and the full meaning of Marie's Summer, depends on a painful truth. Growing up does not mean finally understanding adults. It means realizing that adults do not fully understand themselves. Marie begins by treating Alexandre as the answer to feelings she cannot name. She imagines him as an entrance into maturity, romance, and personal importance. By the time summer ends, she has learned that desire does not provide clarity. It creates rivalry, concealment, embarrassment, and consequences. Moreau called the film a portrait of the perilous passage from childhood to femininity, when adult language suddenly stops sounding coded. Marie learns that language. What she hears is hardly reassuring. That distinction separates the adolescent from coming-of-age stories built around conquest. Marie does not earn adulthood by securing Alexandre's affection. She grows through disappointment. Her fantasy collapses when she recognizes that his emotional and sexual world belongs to adults, including her own mother, and that being intensely in love does not make her capable of entering it. This could have been played as humiliation alone. Moreau gives it greater complexity. Marie's feelings are real even when her imagined relationship is impossible. The film respects the emotional size of first love without pretending that emotional intensity erases age, experience, or responsibility. That balance is rare. Tenderness without romantic dishonesty. Eva's role complicates the idea of female inheritance. A simpler film would position mother and daughter as opposites, the innocent girl against the selfish adult woman. Moreau sees a more unsettling continuity. Marie's jealousy, longing, secrecy, and possessiveness are not alien to Eva. They are early versions of impulses the mother still carries. Womanhood is therefore not presented as a destination where confusion disappears. Eva has more experience than Marie, but experience has not made her immune to reckless desire. Marie looks at her mother and glimpses not merely betrayal, but a possible future self. That recognition hurts because the boundary between child and adult suddenly becomes thinner than she expected. Mamie offers another model. She understands desire without worshiping or condemning it. Simone Signoret plays her as someone who has lived long enough to know that moral certainty is often a luxury enjoyed by observers. Her compassion does not mean she considers every action harmless. It means she recognizes that exposure and shame rarely repair emotional damage. Mamie protects Marie by refusing to transform one painful summer into a permanent judgment of her character. She allows the girl to lose innocence without losing dignity. In a film filled with people watching one another, Mamie's gaze is the only one that consistently sees without trying to possess, punish, or classify. That is the film's deepest feminist idea. Moreau does not define female maturity through desirability, marriage, motherhood, or sexual experience. She defines it through consciousness, the ability to read the world while resisting the identities that world imposes. Violette, the unmarried mother, shows what happens when a community turns a woman's private life into public property. Eva shows the cost of living inside roles that no longer contain one's desires. Mamie demonstrates a freedom built from survival and perspective. Marie stands among these possibilities, absorbing them before she can choose. Femininity is not one path. It is a field of pressures, permissions, punishments, and partial escapes. The summer of 1939 expands that personal awakening into historical tragedy. Marie is leaving childhood while Europe is leaving peace. Moreau described the setting as a moment of false, trembling calm before the approaching war disrupted every life. The parallel could have become heavy-handed, but the film keeps history at the horizon. People eat, flirt, dance, work, and gossip while catastrophe gathers outside their immediate vision. Marie believes her romantic disappointment is the largest event imaginable. From her perspective, it is. The audience knows that another rupture is coming, one that will make the village's routines, Alexandre's Jewish identity, and the family's private tensions newly dangerous. That knowledge changes the meaning of nostalgia. The adolescent remembers rural life tenderly, but it does not argue that the past was morally pure. The village preserves community, craftsmanship, ritual, and intergenerational intimacy. It also preserves sexism, surveillance, antisemitism, and the casual cruelty of gossip. Moreau refuses the comforting lie that lost worlds deserve love because they were better. They deserve attention because they were inhabited. Beauty and injustice occupy the same landscape. The summer light remains beautiful even when it falls across hypocrisy. In fact, the film's melancholy comes from that contradiction. Something can be deeply loved without being innocent. Memory itself becomes a creative force. The autobiographical traces, Moreau's voiceover, and the seasonal structure suggest that the story is being reconstructed from emotional remnants rather than reported as exact chronology. The film moves the way childhood memory moves. A face remains vivid while an explanation disappears. A dance survives more clearly than the conversation surrounding it. Shame returns with physical intensity, while entire weeks vanish. Moreau does not use memory to soften the past. She uses it to recover the scale events possessed when first experienced. Alexandre may become one figure in a long life, but to Marie in that summer, he reorganizes existence. Memory preserves that disproportion. The film's weaknesses grow from the same gentleness that gives it beauty. Its episodic movement can feel dramatically loose, and Moreau's sympathy sometimes prevents conflict from cutting as deeply as it might. Eva's choices could sustain harsher scrutiny. Alexandre occasionally remains more symbolic than fully dimensional, functioning as the object through which mother and daughter confront themselves. Viewers seeking confrontation may find the film evasive, yet a more forceful treatment might destroy what makes it distinctive. Moreau is not building a trial. She is reconstructing the moment before judgment becomes easy, when every person remains partly mysterious, and every emotion still contains several meanings. Within Moreau's directorial work, The Adolescent now looks less like a side project and more like a central statement. The Jeanne Moreau Foundation made restoration and digitization of her films an early priority, and the 4K restoration, created from the original 35mm negative, has allowed the film to return through retrospectives and home media as part of a coherent filmmaking legacy. Across Lumiere, The Adolescent, and Lillian Gish, Moreau repeatedly examines women who have been watched by others and asks what happens when they control the act of looking. My verdict: The Adolescent is an imperfect, emotionally exact film. Its drama whispers when it could shout, and occasionally that whisper becomes too faint. But its restraint protects something more valuable than narrative force: the authenticity of a girl encountering adult contradiction without being reduced to either victim or fantasy. Moreau understands that innocence is not ignorance. It is the temporary belief that knowledge will make the world coherent. Marie loses that belief, yet she leaves with curiosity, compassion, and selfhood still alive. The war will come. Childhood will not return. What survives is the gaze she has learned to claim as her own. What makes The Adolescent linger is not the intensity of its plot, but the accuracy of its emotional weather. Many coming-of-age films are structured around obvious thresholds: a first kiss, a public rebellion, a departure from home. Jeanne Moreau chooses something harder to dramatize: the moment when familiar people become strangers. Marie does not simply discover desire during her summer in the countryside. She discovers that her mother has a private self, her father can be wounded, Alexandre exists beyond her fantasy, and Mamie's wisdom comes from experiences she may never fully describe. Childhood ends when the adults around us stop appearing complete. A second viewing changes the film. The first time through, Marie's fascination with Alexandre dominates because her feelings dominate her own consciousness. Watch again, and Mamie quietly becomes the central character. Simone Signoret is rarely positioned as the loudest presence in a scene, yet everything seems to pass through her awareness. She notices changes before anyone speaks of them. She understands Marie's embarrassment without turning it into a joke. She recognizes adult weakness without pretending it has no consequences. Signoret creates the impression that Mamie is carrying memories from summers the film never shows. Marie believes her experience is unprecedented. Mamie knows that every generation feels the same. The film's treatment of Eva also becomes richer with time. Through Marie's wounded eyes, her mother can appear selfish and disloyal, almost as though she has deliberately entered the girl's romantic dream to destroy it. But Eva is trapped inside a different coming-of-age story: the adult realization that marriage, motherhood, and social respectability have not resolved her needs. Edith Clever plays her with an emotional distance that can look cold until we recognize it as confinement. Moreau does not excuse her affair or erase the pain it creates. She simply refuses to make female desire understandable only when it is youthful, innocent, or socially approved. Alexandre remains deliberately harder to grasp. Marie experiences him as the center of the universe, but Moreau never grants him the cinematic importance that fantasy normally gives its romantic object. He is a doctor, an adult, a Jewish man living beneath the approaching threat of European war, and a participant in emotional decisions Marie cannot comprehend. Yet he is also partly a projection. What Marie loves is not merely Alexandre, but what proximity to him seems to promise. Adulthood, freedom, importance, an escape from being treated as a child. When that projection collapses, the pain is real, even though the imagined relationship never was. That difference between fantasy and emotional truth is one of Moreau's sharpest insights. Adults often dismiss adolescent feelings because their objects seem temporary or unrealistic. The film understands that impermanence does not make an emotion false. Marie's love may be impossible, but the jealousy, humiliation, hope, and grief it produces are completely authentic. Moreau grants those feelings dignity without treating Marie's wishes as entitlement. She can desire Alexandre without having a claim upon him. She can be devastated without becoming the story's tragic victim. Growth begins when she learns that the strength of a feeling does not determine another person's obligation to return it. The historical setting pushes that lesson beyond romance. The summer of 1939 is filled with people behaving as though ordinary life will continue because ordinary life has always continued. Meals are served, work is completed, dances are held, affairs begin, children play. The audience knows that these routines are standing on the edge of catastrophe. Marie's emotional mistake, believing her immediate world is stable, mirrors the wider mistake surrounding her. Both childhood and peace depend upon structures that seem permanent until they suddenly are not. Moreau never forces the comparison. She allows history to remain just distant enough that every moment of warmth carries an aftertaste of loss. This is also why The Village cannot be reduced to nostalgia. Moreau remembers its communal rhythms with affection, but she sees the cruelty hidden inside familiarity. Everybody knows everybody, which means help can arrive quickly, but so can judgment. Violette's treatment exposes the unequal moral code governing women's sexuality. Gossip turns private pain into entertainment. Antisemitism sits beside neighborly routine, waiting for political conditions that will make it more dangerous. The community preserves rituals, stories, and human connection while also preserving prejudice. Moreau's memory is loving because it is honest, not because it sanitizes what has been lost. And that may explain why The Adolescent remained less celebrated than many films featuring Moreau as an actress. Its virtues are quiet. It does not offer the formal shock associated with the French New Wave, the dramatic intensity of a grand historical epic, or the easy satisfaction of a romance fulfilled. Its achievement lies in calibration. How long Marie watches, how little Mamie says, how gently summer light touches a world nearing rupture. The film asks viewers to notice emotional changes before they become plot developments. That kind of cinema can be overlooked because it refuses to demand importance. It waits for attention. Seen today, the film feels like Jeanne Moreau reclaiming control over the gaze that had defined much of her career. She had spent decades embodying women watched, desired, interpreted, and mythologized by famous male directors. Here, she places authority with a girl learning to look for herself. Marie's gaze is naive, jealous, sometimes unfair, but it belongs to her. By the end, she has not mastered adulthood. Nobody in the film has. She has gained something more useful. The knowledge that people contain hidden lives, desire carries consequences, and understanding another person begins by accepting that they can never be entirely possessed.